Aslam Ali Khan was the jack of all sex trades and master of all marriage ceremonies. He was prepared to do anything to make money. He was an Indian Muslim from Hyderabad and operated a small marriage agency. While in India, apart from his main business of selling young Muslim girls to old Arab men, he would steal babies from hospitals and sell them to Gondas, Indian gangsters. He specialized in marrying simple village girls. Unbeknownst to the victims and their families, these mock weddings supplied more than 30 village girls only for them to be brought to the city and sold to a pimp. Eventually the law caught up with him while he was stealing a baby from a local hospital in Hyderabad. The police interrogated him and was soon able to extract enough of an admission of guilt. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 10 years of hard labor. 10 months later, he escaped and fled across the border into Pakistan. There he bought a Pakistani passport and made his way into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In Jeddah, he found employment as a taxi driver. Old habits die hard, and soon he began procuring prostitutes for his Arab customers. Sometimes, he used married women who were interested in making a little extra money on the side. He dealt with women from all over the world. His business was not limited to prostitutes. He also supplied men for sexually frustrated Saudi women that were neglected by their polygamous husbands. In Jeddah, he was drawn to provide for the particular Saudi quirkiness of having sex with small boys. Having a high percentage of homosexuals within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Aslam began connecting Saudi homosexuals with interested parties. Aslam Ali Khan was neither gay nor impotent. He just fancied money for sex of any kind. Oddly asexual, he made his living in a land with very odd sexual mores, where bestiality is common and tolerated. This phenomenon among the Arab Muslim nations involve ordinary stock animals such as goats, sheep, and donkeys. Occasionally, a chicken will do. Aslam Khan led Rehana Khan and Ifat Khan to his apartment. After hearing her story, he offered to marry her. Rehana rejected his proposal. Then, he explained to her that she could not stay in his apartment if she was not his wife. The neighbors would call the police and both of them would go to jail. Rehana remained unmoved. Finally, he convinced her to marry him on paper. Rehana fell for this well-worn trap and agreed to marry him in principle. A Pakistani imam was then summoned to conduct their marriage contract. For Aslam Ali Khan, this was a well-traveled route. In his previous career, he acted as matchmaker in front of the Hyderabad marriage court. In the event a Muslim girl fell in love with a Hindu boy, and her parents objected, it was Aslam's job to arrange the marriage in civil court. He would provide the 3 witnesses, the wedding gown, the lawyer, and judge, paid with a hefty bribe of course, and then a bona fide court marriage certificate was issued. Once Rehana was married to him, Aslam invited one of his rich Arab customers to his apartment to show her off. The man was struck in awe at the vision of her loveliness. She had far surpassed his definition of a beautiful woman. Becoming overeager in his longings for her, he requested time alone with Rehana. He promised to pay whatever Aslam would ask for her. Aslam pretended to be grieved at heart, reminding the Saudi that this girl was now his wife. He added that she had just arrived from India and he showed him their new marriage certificate. The Saudi offered to double his offer if Aslam would get down from his wife and give her to him to climb on her. This saying goes back to an ancient wife-swapping custom between Arab men. The Prophet Muhammad forbade this custom at the time a great Arab chieftain asked him to get down from his beloved wife, Aisha, so that he could mount over her. Muslim mujahideen throughout the Islamic history praised themselves for climbing over the women of their enemies. However, Muhammad did not forbid the switching of female slaves. In fact, sex with female slaves, without marrying them, is permitted in Islam to this very day, Surat 4, verse 3. Moreover, he allowed his followers to rape the women of their enemies even if they are married and their husbands are alive. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, "The Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, sent a military expedition to Autaz on the occasion of the Battle of Hunain. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you save those captives whom your right hands possess. Abu Dawud, Hadith number 2150. Aslam Ali Khan agreed and accepted the deal. He was fully aware that Rayhana was neither his wife nor a prostitute. Expecting her to resist and scream bloody murder and attract the attention of the neighbors, or even the police, Aslam decided to take another route. He would sell her to the Saudi as a maidservant. That being the case, both buyer and seller would be in the clear. Aslam reasoned with the Saudi, mentioning that as long as his wife was staying with him, he would be tempted to sleep with her or sell her to his other customers. If you want to have her all to yourself, then you should take her to your house as a maidservant, Aslam said. The Saudi man broke into a broad smile at the brilliant idea that immediately would reduce Rayhana to an unpaid maidservant and sex slave. The price Aslam demanded was more than he had ever charged anyone. Writing down his client's address, he promised to bring Rayhana and her daughter to him the following day. The Saudi man wrote a check in Aslam Khan's name for exactly half of the agreed upon amount, and promised to pay the balance upon delivery. As soon as the Saudi left, Aslam approached Rayhana and told her that he had found a very good job for her. He then said that the Arab who came to their apartment was his friend and a very wealthy one at that, who just happened to be looking for a good Muslim woman to work in his house as a maidservant. Leaving out all of the other details, he painted a lovely picture of how she was going to work for him in his house and how well she was going to be paid. Rayhana was ecstatic. She thanked Aslam repeatedly and called on Allah to bless him abundantly. He quieted her down and told her that she would live in his friend's house with her daughter, but would still remain his wife on paper. As such, she would be able to return home anytime. But, in the back of his mind, he was already planning his next move to another apartment. The Saudi, Sheikh Hamza bin Khalid, was older than Rayhana's father. The Sheikh had already married and divorced several women. He was compulsively driven by his hunger for women but soon became tired of them. As a compulsive sex addict, he treated them like meat. This Saudi, however, liked his meat fresh. Each newcomer would hear him say, "I love your body so much and I feel like eating one of your breasts." Sheikh Hamza looked like the kind of man that might actually eat human flesh had one of his women actually cut off one of her breasts and cooked it for him. None of his sex victims escaped being bitten all over her body while having sex with him. He was that kind of sexually deviant cannibal. Sheikh Hamza bin Khalid's infatuation for Rayhana ran deeper than the oceans. He had never liked any woman as much as he liked Rayhana, nor had he ever paid such a large sum of money for a woman before. This time the Sheikh was planning for once to keep a woman wholly to himself for good. He wanted her to be his Habibti, and he would be her only Habibi. When he first feasted his eyes upon Rayhana Khan, he thought she was a great Indian film actress. From the time he paid the required deposit for her, he waited impatiently for his perpetual virgin of paradise to come to his house and satisfy his lustful desires. Of course, Rayhana did not see a single coin from this closed-door transaction. As any good business owner, Aslam Ali Khan wanted to impress Sheikh Hamza bin Khalid. He sacrificed a few rials, which is the basic monetary unit of the Saudis. He took Rayhana to a beauty salon to prepare her for her new role. He convinced her that she would find more favor in the eyes of her employer and his wife if she had a beauty makeover. Rayhana had never been to a beauty parlor before. She accepted the suggestion and went along with him, her daughter tagging behind them. At the beauty salon, Aslam offered to take Ifat for a walk in the city. Rayhana did not trust any man with her little girl. She apologized to Aslam and firmly told him that she would keep her daughter with her. A Filipino woman ran the beauty parlor. All the staff were Filipino women too. According to the rules of the salon, no man was allowed to enter inside. Each and every man that brought his wife would be told to leave and return in 2 hours. Aslam Ali Khan, like all others, was expected to comply. He introduced Rehana as his new wife, just in from Bombay. From the service brochure, he selected the special preparations from the bride package. The Filipinos marveled at the stunning beauty that had earlier been hidden by her niqab. Rehana remained enshrouded in her underdress, as was customary. All three beauticians set to work upon her hair, face, and body, with the eagle-eyed salon owner observing them from out the corner of her eye. The shrewd salon owner was in the routine of collecting all money due up front before any work commenced, and Aslam paid her in full. Reading her magazines and newspapers, she kept a close eye on her workers. She was a very strict woman. She had, after all, come all the way from the Philippines to make money. That was why she adamantly refused to have a second child despite her husband's pleading. Children cost money, and that was that. The salon owner was quick to notice Rehana's beauty but lost interest quickly, only to be immersed once again in her newspapers. She was acutely aware that her own eyes were tiny, and her insecurities were not made better while looking at Rehana, whose eyes were large, attractive, and alluring. Small as her eyes were, they were quick and observant, with a penchant for fine details. A corner of her eye swept across a photo of a woman in the newspaper. Her other eye stopped and decided to join its sister. The size of the reward offered for information about the lady in the picture galvanized her into action. Jumping out of her chair, she slid over to Rehana and scanned her face with the intensity of a mongoose sizing up a cobra. She could not find a single iota of difference between the photo of the woman in the newspaper and the Indian woman that was sitting in her salon. She remained silent and returned to her chair. Picking up the phone, she dialed the number mentioned in the advertisement and counted the seconds nervously, full of anticipation. This day, she lost all interest in watching her workers and reading her newspapers. A half-hour crept along, punctuated by the arrival of an old man running into the salon. With the exception of this particular man, the Filipino salon owner had never allowed any man to step inside her salon. She did not allow him to take his dead, resurrected, lost and now found maidservant, until he wrote a check to her as was promised in the newspaper. The Filipino woman broke all her rules that day. First, she allowed a man to enter the taboo area of her salon where young females could be seen without niqabs on, where their faces were exposed, open shoulders, exposed thighs and buttocks. Second, she allowed the Saudi man to take a woman out of the salon, which he did not bring to the salon. This was probably the most ironclad rule of the salon. Only the person accompanying the woman and paying her fees is permitted to pick her up. Even her husband, father, or brother would not be allowed to lay claim to her if he was not the person who brought her there. Thirdly, without asking for proof of his identity or relationship to Rehana, the Filipino woman allowed the old man to take his lost and found maidservant after he wrote out a check and handed it to her. After examining the check and its amount very carefully, the happy Filipino businesswoman gave in to Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed's insistent demand for his maidservant and her daughter. After about 30 minutes, Aslam Ali Khan was due to return for his new wife and deliver her to her high bidder. Needless to say, upon his arrival, he was told that the Indian woman and her daughter were taken away by their kafil or sponsor. Aslam became extremely belligerent and started threatening to wreck the salon. His anger was dissipated once the salon owner picked up the phone and threatened to call the Jeddah police on him. Quickly remembering his not-so-clean background and criminal history, and the more than likely risk of getting his head chopped off, Aslam's countenance changed and he begged the Filipino salon owner to forgive him for the intrusion. There was no need for her to call the police, for he would leave quietly. Ever the shrewd one, he managed to convince her to part with the business card of his wife's sponsor, which included his phone number and address. Despite the phone being firmly in its cradle, and the threat of beheading diminished, Aslam Ali Khan began to worry about his life. He had to devise a plan to escape from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in order to save his life from Sheikh Hamza bin Khalid. He could either return to Sheikh Hamza bin Khalid a refund of his purchase price, or either he could run for his life. He chose to run for his life. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed was a man accustomed to getting his way in life. He had tried every possible means to get possession of the most beloved woman he had ever loved. He had gone to every police station in the city of Jeddah and showed the passports of his maidservant and her daughter to report them missing. He lodged an official complaint against the 2 unknown police officers who allegedly had kidnapped his maidservant and her child. He put advertisements in all the newspapers concerning the kidnapping of the 2 abducted females, the mother and her child. He promised a huge reward for anyone who could provide information about the 2 missing newcomers, lost in the land of no return. After a short time, when no one had phoned him or had come forward and inquired about the reward, Sheikh Ahmed doubled the bounty. He paid the most popular newspaper in Jeddah to advertise and publish the photo of his maidservant every Friday. He chose Friday because it was the only official public holiday in Saudi Arabia. He anticipated that everyone would be home on this day and read their newspapers. For more than 1 month, the phone remained silent. The sheikh was in great desperation. Day and night, he constantly lamented over her mysterious disappearance, and he could not forget the woman he had paid for handsomely. Many a time, he instructed his Pakistani driver to take him to the desert where he could search for her. He searched all around the city for any clue that might lead him to her whereabouts and the whereabouts of her daughter. It was all for naught, and nothing came of his desperate search. One particular Friday afternoon, he was on his way to the public prayer when his cell phone began ringing while he was sitting in the back seat of his brand new Mercedes. As it is in other OPEC countries, it would be downright shameful if his relatives or friends caught sight of him driving his own car. Men of his stature and wealth are obligated to have a chauffeur. Sheikh Ahmed's chauffeur was a Pakistani. Strangely enough, it is rumored that most of the children of OPEC countries were probably fathered by Indian or either Pakistani chauffeurs employed by their wealthy employers. In the face of sexually repressed polygamous wives, a personal chauffeur is inevitably practical. When his cell phone began to ring, Sheikh Ahmed took the phone out of his pocket and looked at the number. The caller's ID displayed, the Filipino Beautiful Women's Salon. At first, he thought it was a wrong number and hence decided to ignore it. However, his sixth sense reminded him of his weekly Friday ad. Biting back negative thoughts, he responded to the call, only to be greeted by the voice of a Filipino woman with a funny Arabic accent. "This Mrs. Cham Chum Chi, owner of Filipino Beautiful Wam Saloon. I callan regardin you advertisement about you missin maid, Rihan Akun. She sitting here right now in saloon. Come imdly and bring reward money and you get her." The astute, Mrs. Chi, did not give Sheikh Ahmed a chance to interrupt her monologue. She mechanically rattled off her address and hung up. Glancing up from his phone, the lovesick sheikh pronounced a new destination to his chauffeur, forgetting about his obligatory Friday prayer. He urged his driver to speed to the location immediately and ignore all traffic signals and speed limits. The driver was concerned they would attract the attention of police surveillance vehicles, but Sheikh Ahmed shouted, "You work for me, not the police. If you want your next paycheck, do as I say or go back to being nothing. Don't stop the car until we arrive at the salon. I'll take care of the police." The address recited by Mrs. Chi lay on the outskirts of Jeddah. Under normal conditions, it would take an hour's drive. However, with his belligerent employer barking at him like a lovesick puppy dog, the Pakistani chauffeur closed the distance in a mere half-hour. The car, racing at the speed of light, arrived at Mrs. Cham Chum Chi place of business in record time, but not before it was captured by the flash of at least 4 highway cameras. When the crazy Ks reached the salon, the 3 Filipino beauty consultants had already finished the face, hair, and body of the lovely Layla, and they began to work on her nails. Rayhana soaked in the ambience of attention being lavished upon her. She enjoyed being queen for a day in this luxurious salon. She was dimly aware of her beauty, but that day she could not believe the glorious sight of the beautiful woman staring at her from across the huge mirror reflecting an image greater than all the goddesses of India. She thought her Allah had given her more beauty than all these valueless goddesses because he had chosen her to be Muslim. Her miserable life and present troubles never gave her the possibility to really see herself. With her lot in life, she was always worried about something. Now with the promise of a new job, a free and safe shelter just around the corner, she succumbed to the seductive atmosphere of the salon, relaxed a little while she enjoyed her salon treatments and new confidence in her beauty and appearance. As usual, whenever a ray of hope shone in her saddened heart, Rayhana always remembered her lover. Once again, Jamal suddenly appears in a vision standing before her. He sees her exquisite beauty and cannot resist taking her into his arms. She closes her eyes and surrenders to her lover, melting into the safety of his loving embrace, the lusciousness of his lips, and the tenderness of his touch. Her imagination took her away from all the torture, rape, humiliation, and violence she had lived through, for she knew what real love was, and it was this love she kept safe inside her heart and mind. This dreamy state was suddenly interrupted by a firm abrasive grasp shaking her right arm. Opening her eyes, she was startled by the sight of an old man speaking to her in Arabic. Her moment with Jamal was cut short. A gamut of emotions overcame Rayhana as she struggled to recognize the elderly man standing before her. Her heart rate spiked remembering the brutal beating of the correctional officers. She assumed that the police had come to arrest her again. By now, she learned that in this no-woman land everything is possible. A woman can be taken away from her husband and raped for breaking some stupid Sharia law, such as there is nothing with them to prove their relationship to each other. A vulnerable woman like Rayhana without a male guardian for those Arabs is just like an open vagina that any man can jump over. Anyhow, peering into his happy face and hearing him call out to her repeatedly, her feelings of panic evaporated. It dawned upon Rayhana that his face was familiar to her. With her memory failing her, it came as an absolute shock to her when the old Arab showed her an Indian passport with her photo. Another passport carrying the photo of her daughter followed. She recognized the two passports as the ones she had received from the travel agency, which had been taken away from her by the Bombay police officers. Rayhana did not recognize her sponsor until he mentioned the words Taj Mahal and Kolaba. She immediately recognized Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed and recalled that he was the one who had met her in front of the Taj Mahal Hotel at Bombay downtown. This was the man who had promised to give her a work visa to the rich Arab country. Her suspicion turned to joy when she realized that the old Arab had somehow brought their passports from India and had come to rescue them. The happiness reflected in Rayhana's beautiful face filled the heart of the old man with indescribable joy. He did not even bother to ask her where she had been or how she had come to be in the salon. She appeared to him as a bride prepared for her bridegroom. Without further ado, and with much haste, he forked over the reward, grabbed Rayhana by her hand, and took her out of the beauty salon as a bridegroom escorting his beautiful bride from her father's house to his home to consummate the marriage. Little Ifat followed behind her mother like a little bridesmaid. The reunited pair made an odd couple, comparing Rayhana Khan's 27 years and 5 days to Sheikh Ahmed's 69 years, 11 months, and 25 days. Rayhana was betrothed to her late husband at the age of 19. His idea of family planning was to give her a daughter and 5 sons in just 6 years of marriage. Had he not taken his own life, Rayhana might have had 10 children. Some Indian families have been known to have 25 children. There was an old Muslim Indian man living in the city of Bombay who was featured on the front page of a popular newspaper celebrating his 80th birthday with the birth of his 75th child. Of course, not all of them were from one woman. He was a notorious polygamist. Although India is a secular country, it still allows Muslims to practice polygamy. Nevertheless, polygamy in India is still illegal for Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Buddhists, and followers of other religions. The current saying then was if this notorious polygamist were to sit near an Indian girl in a bus, she would become pregnant. Indian women can be very fertile, much like Chinese women. In 2020, the Indian population is expected to reach 1 billion. China of course has already hit a record number of 1 billion people. Rehana spoke to her sponsor in Hindi but he understood nothing of what she was saying. Although he visited India many times, Sheikh Ahmed was not a linguist, and neither had he picked up any Hindi except for 2 words, yes and no, Jahan and Nahi, aside from his very fluent pronunciation of obscenities. It came as no surprise his entire conversation with Rehana consisted of her name in the affirmative. Rehana, Jahan, Jahan. The old Saudi had only let go of Rehana's hand once up unto that time to pay the crafty Mrs. Chi, who was holding on to Rehana's other hand. With a wide smile on his face, he had rummaged through his suitcase, retrieved his checkbook and made out a check. He handed the check over to the Empress of Beauty Salons, bowing low to this eagle eye that had found his missing diamond amidst a land of desert sand and walking coffins. After much grandiosity, he then reattached himself to Rehana. Mrs. Chi schemed over the check for errors. Satisfied with the amount and the signature on the check, she released Rehana's other hand and gladly accepted the old man's business card with a smile. With such a huge amount in the palm of her hand, the Filipino woman had completely forgotten about the man posing as Rehana's husband. Rehana herself had also completely forgotten about Aslam Khan and her new employer. By the time it came to her mind, the glimmering Mercedes was halfway to its destination. While in the vehicle with her rescuer, Rehana Khan was emotionally engrossed in narrating her tragic experience in the holy city. Noticing the chauffeur was Pakistani, she began speaking to him in Urdu and using him as her interpreter. When Rehana remembered Aslam, she told the chauffeur to turn the car around and return to the salon. She said that she wanted to thank him and apologize for not going to the house of his Arab friend who wanted to hire her as a maidservant. The Pakistani related this suggestion to his boss. Sheikh Ahmed suspected something fishy about this Aslam and his Saudi friend. This story about her becoming a maidservant to someone else did not sit well with him. His suspicion was piqued when he realized that the Indian man had taken Rehana to the beauty salon to have her prepped before handing her over to this new employer. Firm in his decision not to turn back, Sheikh Ahmed told his chauffeur to explain to Rehana that the Filipino woman had been instructed to hand his business card over to Aslam Ali Khan.